Morning. It is the day after the Never Summer 60K, and I just want to give some updates on how the day went because I unfortunately had to draw out at the mile 30 mark, which pretty disappointed in that I didn't get to finish. So there's just been a lot of breakdowns and everything since that point. But just wanted to explain how the whole process went. So we started the race at approximately 5:30 in the morning. It started out good because the first 2 miles were pretty low elevation. It was pretty flat most of the time before we got to our first climb. And so with all of the racers around you, you feel super excited. So we were feeling good, and that definitely put us at a good point before our climbs because we were pretty worried about our cutoff at mile 19. Just because of all the elevation we had to get to at that point. We were pretty 50-50 whether we would make it, and during our last training run in that region, we kind of tried to test that, and we ran about 20 miles and did not make our cutoff time. We barely made it, or barely did not make it. But we also were kind of getting lost with the trails, and we couldn't quite understand where they wanted us to go. There's still snowpack up there when we're doing our training, so that had a big, that was a huge factor in it. So we started off our climb after the 2 miles that were around the flats. That was generally just a lot of hiking with all of the gain. We didn't see anyone try to attempt to run up that first climb, which was up the 7 Utes mountain, which is in the Never Summer region. So the climb there was good. We just kind of pushed as much as we could. Our general rule was just no stopping. We saw some other racers that just had to stop and get a breath from the elevation change. And just it sets your heart rate up quite a bit. But our goal was just to keep moving, whether that's just super slow, whatever pace that we could go, just put one foot in front of the other and just don't stop as much as we could. So we definitely met that goal, which was very huge for us, and being able to make cutoff. So we got to 7 Utes Mountain. That was gorgeous up there. We made our first descent down 7 Utes, and that was a huge descent. We're trying really carefully to not slip. There's a lot of loose gravel up there, so constantly pole planting and just taking our dear sweet time to not fall. So that descent just didn't make up any time. Honestly, it was probably the same amount of time to get up the mountain as it did to get down that portion, just because we had to go slow with how loose it was and how steep it was down there. But we had a calmer descent after getting off the summit. There was this region where we start dropping down towards Lake Agnes, and it was a pretty good descent, but also at the same time we could run it. So we tried to pick up speed as much as we could. With my knees already having tendonitis, I tried to be as careful as possible to not put a ton of weight, at least on my left knee. That was giving me just a bunch of problems before. I've been trying to go to acupuncture every single week and also chiropractic work just to try to clear that up as much as I could, because after our quad rock 25 miler, I just wrecked my body, and I've been constantly trying to repair that. And it's gotten a little bit better, but not the greatest. So we got down to Lake Agnes, where we met up with Aaron and Nugget, which was really nice. Just stopped and saw them and gave them a small peck before continuing down. And then from Lake Agnes, it was a pretty steep descent to get to our logging road, but that was pretty short, but we had to take our time because there was a lot of loose gravel and just also some snow that we had to get through. And then once we got onto the gravel logging road, we tried to jog as far as we could on that, because that was our biggest flat portion of the day. So that was about 2 miles until the first aid station, which was 11.3 miles in. We got there, and even before Lake Agnes, my stomach started getting pretty wrecked. I was not feeling good. I've been on an antibiotic, and every single time I take it, I just get really nauseous. As much food as I can eat with it, it still just doesn't make me feel good. So I knew that going into the race, so I tried to eat my breakfast, which was a bagel for carbs, and then also take a yogurt to try to help settle my stomach, and that helped with the first couple of miles. But it really quickly wore off, and I started to feel that nausea come back in. So even before we got to Lake Agnes, I was just not feeling my best. We saw Aaron, and I told him that I feel like absolute crap, but just try to continue on. So when we did get to the aid at mile 11.3, I was just searching for any rescue to help my stomach. So I had some ginger ale. I pulled out this natural ginger chew that I had on me and just tried to settle my stomach a little bit before we made our second ascent of the day up another mountain. So that helped for a couple miles, but quickly wore off. I was glad to have that little bit of relief. So we went up the second climb, and it was kind of interesting terrain because a lot of water was coming down those trails. So it was kind of like this small creek that you had to walk through the whole time. So that was interesting. We got to the top. We're feeling all right. We had to take like a little bit more breaks. We're just feeling the elevation at that point from going up and down, up and down. But then we started our descent down to mile 19.3, and we knew that we had to push as much as we could. So as we started our descent, we just tried to run as long as we could, and I was constantly fighting a lot of nausea. I got a huge side ache. I was trying to keep up my nutrition and keep up my calories. But honestly, it was just really hard at that point. I just was not feeling great at all. My body was just really mad at me at that point. But I tried my best to just push. And Bridget kept the lead, which helped motivate me to keep going because she was doing a good job of just running the whole part down. But it was definitely a push, but we did make it. And right before we made it, I was having a pretty big breakdown on whether or not I could keep going. I saw Aaron, and I just started crying. I just didn't know like how much longer I could go. My body was hurting. I just felt so much pain. My stomach was just in like terrible condition. And I started to feel my left leg. Everything had gotten like super tight because I had tendonitis in my knee and my ankle. So everything really acted up on that last descent. So I was just really hurting. I had a compression sock that went almost up to my knee, and I had to take that off. It was just like there was too much pressure going on. So Aaron helped take that off. We did like the massage gun on it, and we made cutoff time by maybe it was like 20 minutes, but we took that whole entire time to try to recoup my leg because I was limping at that point and was only able to kind of put my full force on my right leg. My other one was just kind of like limping along. So we tried to massage everything out, which helped. And our next plan was just to get to the next aid station, which was mile 26. To just like recoup and see how that all goes. So I left there pretty emotional because I was just feeling wrecked already at that point, but I just wanted to keep going just to see. So we went up the next ascent, which was Diamond Peak, which was probably the hardest ascent of the whole race. It was so difficult. Definitely 14er level hiking where it was super steep, not great terrain. It was very loose, little tiny pebbles that would just kind of shoot you back down. And just every couple of steps, I just felt really out of oxygen. And at that point, I had to take those breaks because I just couldn't go any faster than what I was going. My heart rate was really high. I was really out of oxygen. And at that point, I was very, very exhausted. So just trying to take little steps at a time. Bridget got ahead of me, and I knew that like I was really struggling with my body at that point to keep up. So she went ahead and summited, and I got there shortly after her, but I quickly realized that I ran out of water and I was too disorientated at the last aid to check on my water, which was dumb because I only had my 2-liter one to save on weight on my pack because my pack was already pretty heavy. So I ran out of water, and there was a first aid crew at the top of Diamond Peak, which really helped me out because I was asking them, do you have any water? Because I don't have any. And I knew that there was still about over 3 miles to get to the next aid. So luckily, one of them had half of a bladder that they were able to get me. It was probably a little less than a liter, but it was still better because I knew I was super dehydrated and just fighting all of that. So they stocked me up on that. And then when I started the descent of Diamond Peak, that's kind of when everything really started like going downhill like really quickly. Like I was already pretty hurting at that point, but coming down Diamond was so steep and my body was so tired that my tendonitis just really inflamed at that point. And I could feel like I could barely take a step without having my knee give out. So I was constantly putting all of my weight on my right and trying to use my poles to anchor me to get down that really steep slope. And then I started putting so much weight on that leg that by the time I got down the first steep descent, I was just really hurting on both sides. Like both my knees were just like in a lot of pain. So I had to kind of walk it out for a while. There was quite a few peaks to get over. We were on Montgomery Pass at that point. But that's kind of when I hit my pain tolerance of just all of my digestional issues as well as my tendonitis on both sides. So constantly I was fighting off if I had to go to the bathroom because my stomach was just in so much pain. I was trying to get enough electrolytes in me and then keep eating my snacks to keep up on energy. And I tried to jog at any time, but it quickly just became too painful in my legs. So I had to just get it like a little by little. But eventually I realized that at mile 26 was probably going to be my done for, just because it was all too painful. But on that ridge line was kind of scary because I was kind of on my own, and thunderstorms clouds started coming in and over me, and I wasn't sure exactly who or if there was anyone behind me. So I kind of got a little nervous up there because it started to rain on me, but luckily there's no thunder or lightning, which was really good, but I was the highest at that peak. So that was a little nerve-wracking. But then finally lent my way to the mile 26 aid, and just kind of had a breakdown there. I started kind of crying and stuff like that, but I kind of was telling them what was going on with my body and how I was feeling. Unfortunately, they could not give me any sort of ride down. They said that only the ride downs are for someone who is critically injured and needs to go to the hospital, because all of the rest of their car was filled with equipment for the aid. So that was kind of crushing to know at that point because I was just, my body was hurting, my knees were hurting so bad, I was limping the whole entire time. So that kind of crushed my spirits, but I just accepted the fact that I needed to get to mile 30. So I got some snacks, started walking down the hill, realized I didn't fill up on my water, turned around, went back up. It wasn't too far, but it was still agonizing to have to turn around and fill back up. But then at that point, the sweepers had came in. There's about 3 participants that were behind me, that they went ahead, but then I saw the sweepers and they kind of told the sweepers what was going on. So they agreed to kind of walk down the descent with me, which was a really steep 4-wheel drive road, with lots of big boulders and rocks everywhere. So they followed me down, which was really nice to have that company, because my knees were constantly trying to give out. Every step was like very, very painful. And I just tried to use my poles as much as I could to try to get down. But it was just struggle after struggle. They just went in these massive like waves of pain. where it was like my knee would give out on its strength and I'd have to kind of propel myself back up on my poles and keep going. And I knew that there was an hour and a half until a cutoff at mile 30. But I also knew that I probably wouldn't make it, just because if I was able to run, I probably would have made cutoff, but because I was walking and it was so slow, I probably wasn't going to make it. So they kind of helped my spirits with everything. They were 100-mile, like people who ran 100-mile races all the time, but they were Southern girls, so they're from Kansas and Arkansas. And it was really fun to talk to them, because I was having so many breakdowns. I was like, have you had any ultras that you've had to drop out of? And they just started cackling and they were laughing so hard. And they're like, girl, if we had to tell you all the times that we had to drop out of a race for some reason, like, we can't even tell you how many. But they really boosted my spirits, because they were just telling me that I was crazy for attempting this ultra as my first one, with the elevation gain and being at elevation and just the rough terrain, because they told me they hadn't even attempted this race yet. They wanted to, but they were being volunteers just to get an idea of the race, to see if that's something that they could do, because they would probably attempt either the 60K or there's the 100K distance. But they were telling me to come down to Arkansas and run their 100-mile races with them, and I would be able to do it easily because there's no elevation gain and it's not at elevation. So they kind of helped me distract me from the pain that I was feeling. But I got to roughly mile 29 and a park ranger had driven up, because I think the boys and Aaron had mentioned to the park ranger that they were still waiting on me. It was a little bit after cutoff at that point, and I saw the park ranger, I believe, at 5:30, which was a half an hour after cutoff. And she drove up that extra mile and asked if I wanted to ride down, which I agreed to, because I knew I had already missed cutoff and I was just in so much pain with each step. So she took me down to the 8 at 30, and then I saw Aaron and just had a full breakdown at that point, but was able to get in the car. Someone suggested that I go see the medic, kind of from the pain that I was experiencing. So on a ride down, I was having a really hard time getting my heart rate down. My chest was just really tight. I felt really nauseous, like I was gonna puke at any moment. And so we decided to drop Mark off at where Bridget was going to get to the 2-mile mark from the finish, so he could run with her for those last 2 miles. So we dropped him back off at camp. We went back and saw the medic at the finish line, and he was able to take my vitals and stuff like that, and just said that my heart rate was still pretty high. I told him that I was on an antibiotic and kind of what had been going on, and he kind of explained to me that because I was on an antibiotic as well as fighting an infection in my body, that my white blood cell count was probably really off, and why I was feeling so terrible the whole entire day, and would likely be seeing a lot of side effects, just because of the 2 fights that my body was going through with the infection, as well as just all the pain that I had sent it through with all the elevation, the climbs and stuff like that. So I told him that I was also having a lot of arrhythmia with my high heart rate, and because he couldn't have an EKG there, he could just kind of monitor it. He knew that my heart rate was high, but he's like, we can't really do anything about the arrhythmia just because we don't have that machine. But he's like, I just suggest staying off the caffeine and just monitoring the situation right now. If anything gets worse, see a medic once you get down the mountain, once you're home. So we went back. Aaron got me some food. I could only take like a bite at a time every maybe like 5 to 10 minutes. My stomach was just not handling anything, and I was just in a lot of pain, kind of kneeled over for the most part in the car. But we waited for Bridget to finish, and she did, and that was so exciting to see her cross the finish line, being her farthest race ever. So that was really exciting to see her. She felt really bad for leaving me on the top of the pass with the thunderstorms, and she also had a radio to communicate with the boys, so I had no communication. I was out of coverage that whole time, which was very scary because I didn't know if I could continue on, and my pain just wanted me to just sit down and not get up whatsoever. But I know I had to continue on the next aid, so it was nice to see her, and she told me she was sorry for that, which I totally understand. I'm just so glad that she had finished the race. So quickly after that, we dropped them back off at camp, and my stomach was just not getting any better. I was only able to get a few bites of burger before leaving. I couldn't stomach anything else, and it just seemed like everything was starting to get a little bit worse. So we continued on down the road, and then everything really just started picking up. I told Aaron that we had to pull over. I was just feeling really nauseous, and I felt like something was wrong. So we pulled over, and I couldn't tell if I had to puke or I had to go to the bathroom. So I went to the bathroom, came back to the car, and as I was coming back to the car, I got really dizzy, really nauseous, and it just really scared me because the world, like, everything was spinning. And then I was getting really lightheaded, and Aaron was talking to me, and just like all my hearing was off. It was all muffled. I couldn't hear him, and I felt like I was kind of losing consciousness. And so I told him that I felt like I was about to faint. So we just sat there for a while, and then I had to go to the bathroom again. I was not feeling good, constantly dizzy and kind of everything spinning. Got back to the car. And then at that point, it really felt like I couldn't keep my eyes open any longer. Like, I was just really tired, and I just couldn't fight my eyes not being held open. So I told him that I wanted to take a nap in the car as we continue on. So we continued on down the road, and I don't know how long that my eyes were closed, but I got jolted awake. And instantly puked everywhere, all in the car. We had a bag in front of me just in case, so I tried to get it in the bag as much as possible, but it just kept coming out and out. TMI, I know. But I really wasn't anything but like water and like a little bit of the burger and everything, and just a lot of heaving. That was pretty scary, just because I was trying to breathe and my body kept on wanting to puke out more and more and more. So did that, and that honestly helped me feel a lot better. And then just like couldn't keep my eyes open any longer, so just passed out back in the car, and we're going down the windy canyon. So I kept on getting jolted awake, thinking I had to puke again, and then passing back out, and then that happened the whole ride home. But luckily got home. I was really thankful to be here. We live up 3 flights of stairs, so coming up kind of set my whole body off again, and I started feeling really dizzy and just really sick, and ran to the bathroom again, went to the bathroom, and then just, I was so done. Took a short shower and fell asleep, and then, yeah, I just kind of woke up and just really emotional, and had another breakdown of just being disappointed that I couldn't finish. I really wanted to, but I know my body, like, was trying to make cutoff, and I just couldn't make the cutoff time, even if I guess I was trying to get to cutoff, but I knew that I probably wouldn't make cutoff at mile 30. Missed it by at least 30 minutes. So just like a lot of emotions going over me with the whole thing. I really wanted to finish the race. But I'm also very proud that we made cutoff. Bridget had 2 friends that she knew that didn't make cutoff at mile 19. And I'm just proud that I was able to do my furthest mileage, which was about 29 miles. So during that whole entire me feeling like I was about to die, I told myself that I would never attempt anything like that again. But this morning, just having all these emotions, I'm really feeling like my work is not done yet, as crazy as that sounds, and currently trying to look up other races that I can do before the end of the season, but my options are kind of limited just because of schedule wise, and I know that I can't do any elevation, which will just send me out because of my knees. So right now I'm just kind of brainstorming and seeing where we can go, but just wanted to give an update of the whole day. But yeah, it was a great adventure. I'm glad that I attempted it. I knew there's a lot of things facing me going into this race, But I'm glad I at least attempted the race.